Good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren Ray. I'm a junior here at FIU in the International Relations degree program. I am also an intelligence fellow under the Jack D. Gordon Institute's Intelligence Center for Academic Excellence. My research hones in on how the North Korea-Russia military alliance intensifies regional instability and advances the DPRK's nuclear proliferation. Without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce the moderator of this panel, Dr. Mark Rosenberg. Dr. Rosenberg is Florida International University's 5th president, having served from 2009 to 2022. He now holds the position as a professor here at the university, and he is renowned for his comprehensive academic background in political science. In addition to this, he is also a senior fellow at the Jack D. Gordon Institute, leading initiatives in cybersecurity policy, national security, as well as Latin America affairs. Today, he is joined by our very own Emcee, Mr. Randy Pestana, as well as the Grenadian ambassador to the United States, His Excellence, Tarlie Francis. Thank you very much. Join me in welcoming these prestigious speakers.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here on the heels of that excellent discussion. We're going to now, if you will, focus on the Caribbean and on security issues there. And we have two individuals who have spent their professional careers thinking about these issues. First is our ambassador, Tarlie Francis, who's Grenada's ambassador to the United States. Welcome, Ambassador. Thank you. And the second is Randy Pestana, who just completed 18 months in the office of the Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense / War now, 18 months there as an advisor, and is now returning to FIU to the Jack Gordon Institute as Director for National Security and Policy-related issues. So let's get right to it. So Randy, I'm really curious about the recent national security strategy and its implications for the Caribbean.
Well, thank you. Appreciate to be on this panel, especially with the ambassador and you, President Rosenberg. I think we've heard throughout the conference the redirection of the Western Hemisphere as the priority region, right? And this is something for those who've studied the region for our whole entire careers. We've been waiting for this. And frankly, the region, especially the Caribbean, has been saying, hey, this is the priority region for us, our shared security. So I think the national security strategy touches on a few things in relation to the Caribbean, some direct and some less direct. The first is obviously the prioritization of homeland defense, but looking at the Western Hemisphere and relationships across not just Latin America and the Caribbean, but even up to Canada and Greenland in terms of this shared continental defense and this shared security mission. I think the second piece of it is this emphasis on burden sharing, right? Whereby the United States is saying partners need to step up. They need to do more for our security. They need to do more for their respective security. And as you saw NSC Senior Director Michael Jensen say yesterday, really prioritize their own respective sovereignties and borders. And then the third one, I think people kind of overlooked, which was this idea of the protection and defense of the Gulf of America, right? And I think that's really overlooked, but what that tells you, for the first time that I can recall in memory, a U.S. national security strategy saying this waterway, these waterways directly into the economic lifeblood of the United States, the security lifeblood of the United States, is now a priority, which now brings in countries like Bahamas, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic, at least in the immediate periphery, as part of the homeland defense mission for the United States, and therefore putting burden and putting resources towards Caribbean neighbors to be able to support U.S. national security objectives.
So we all know that for years there's been a lamentation that the United States isn't giving enough attention to the hemisphere. Mr. Ambassador, what about it? Is the national security strategy a welcome departure? Is it a continuity? How do you see it in Grenada, and as well, what is the broader environment in the Caribbean for this new approach?
Thank you very much again to FIU and Randy for having us. Thank you, Dr. Rosenberg.
Thank you.
Now, I think what we experiencing now in the Caribbean is generally and almost always described as instability, geopolitical and global instability. But from the perspective of a Caribbean person, what we are experiencing really is a strategic transition, a period of strategic transition. How that happens is extremely important, and the goal and the objective that are pursued as that happens is also important. We do not see the new or renewed focus on the Caribbean as a problem. It really isn't a problem. In fact, it is adding a competitor which is a natural partner to the Caribbean back into the fold of the competitive geopolitical environment in the region. And for that reason, I would say it is not on the negative side, but on the positive side.
Okay. And how do you view this issue of burden sharing? What's your instinct on that? What does that look like? What are the pros and the cons of that?
Okay. If we think about the Caribbean as a whole, so you speak in the Anglophone, the Francophone, you also have the Antillians, Dutch Antillians, etc. Generally speaking and overall, the biggest value we look for, even in the new focus of the United States as a geopolitical player, is stable democracies. And by and large, most of the Caribbean archipelago is governed by stable democratic processes. There are a few exceptions. 1, 2, 3, you count down the line. And you could include in that Haiti, that has its specific problem, historical problem, which the United States is back in attending to as well. And the protection of that environment, that social, economic, political environment for governance of our peoples, is what we call the defense. In that regard, therefore, the defense of the region is not really the big change. It is the security element. And because security is multidimensional, we now have to focus on how that is done for burden sharing. Now, it is often said that the other partners, the adversaries to the United States are in there, they are building this, they are building that, but what is it? It's infrastructure, it's port, it's those information technology, the cyberspace technology that have crept in there over time. How do you address that as security issue? You have to tie it back to the reasons why all these things crept in. And they crept in mainly because the support for economic development, for social wages, for health expenditure was found somewhere else, not from US companies, not from entities from here. Addressing that, therefore, would help to stabilize the security situation. And I think that is what the more like-minded Caribbean leaders are expecting and are dialoguing about.
So Randy, what's your instinct? Is that going to work in this administration, or is that an approach that may be doomed to difficulty?
Oh, it's certainly doomed to difficulty, but I think that doesn't mean difficult things cannot be done. I think in looking at the Caribbean, one of the things that strikes me, and this is not just my time at the Pentagon, but time before that, is you have a series of different leaders, and I'll kind of tier it, not without saying any names, of course, but you have a series of leaders that want to look like leaders. You have a series of leaders that are making steps and making investments towards becoming security leaders within the region. And then you have those that want to have the willingness but are purely lacking the capabilities or the political infrastructure due to partisan fighting and other competing priorities. So I would say you can do it, but where the U.S. can support is, where are those willing partners? How do we support them in providing them the capabilities and the resources that would incentivize foreign direct investment to come into the countries that would ultimately serve as a force multiplier? But for those leaders that want to just look like leaders, how do we then message to them to say, hey, you can't just go out in the CARICOM forums or the United Nations forums or at the OAS and pretend and praise faux outrage at certain conditions, yet you're not doing the investments or the things you need to do to secure your own respective borders and your own respective security. Those are the ones that I think are the most difficult, because a lot of these leaders are extremely popular in their respective countries. So if you can get away from those leaders that just want to look like leaders and actually invest in those countries that show the willingness and the ability to invest in themselves, then I think you have an opportunity for the Caribbean at large to really prosper, and you'll get the U.S., regardless of administration, you'll get the U.S. support in those environments.
But is that assessment in the U.S. coming from the White House? Is it coming from the Pentagon? Where is it coming from? How does it get done?
No, I think from this administration, I think the burden-sharing piece of countries that are politically aligned, right? You saw that with the America's Counter-Cartel Conference and the SHIELD, right? You had Guyana, Trinidad, Jamaica, the countries that have been very forward pressing about being a priority partner for the United States. So for this administration, being able to go publicly is very good for this administration. But regardless of this administration versus the Biden administration or any administration, what you want to see, and the frustration is always, how do you partner with the region, and how do they invest in themselves to be able to combat the security threats that they're facing? And what you always ran into, and I'm not going to speak for the ambassador, is you have a series of countries who claim to be regional leaders in the Caribbean that are not doing their part. They will speak, they'll do the press, but then when it comes to actioning, when it comes to investing, they're not doing that. Which is sad, because you have a number of countries that are willing to do that, they just don't have the capabilities yet. And I think both administrations, the Trump administration, the Biden administration, administrations prior to that, want to invest in those countries that are both willing and are developing the capabilities to sustain the security fight in the region.
Got it. Mr. Ambassador?
Yeah, I would think that leads us to the question or the point of institutional trust.
Yeah.
There really must be some level of institutional trust in the longevity of relations that are established, such that it doesn't matter who in the Caribbean is actually leading their countries in those plausible democracies, because they get elected. They have popular support. But how do we ensure that the institutional support, that is the institutional partnership, is one that can outlive individuals and personalities? I would say on both sides. If we do not have, or if we have great difficulty in sustaining the level of maintenance of, for example, an institution like jointly run like a port, and that it remains integrated into the inter-American port system, no matter which government is in power or which hurricane has passed, then what we would have is a flip from one moment to the other as to how reliable the relation is. So I think institutional trust is an extremely important thing, and the way in which we have the partnership must also be sustainable, as I say, over time and personalities, but it must be sustainable because of what it is addressing. And if the partnership is actually addressing, it really doesn't take much for some US companies to invest in across 3 or 4 different Caribbean countries in one single industry. If it is marine, for example, marine monitoring, or the marine sector development through the capacity building. This really doesn't have to do with actually who is in office. It actually has to do with the program that is institutionally established as a relationship program that concretely serves the partnership between one institution and the other. At the risk of being challenged, I would say that probably other geopolitical entities have actually done so. And hence the reason why it's so complicated to now decouple, now that the United States attention is refocused. It is difficult to decouple because over time they have institutionalized the relationship and they have allowed the infrastructure that was partnered to construct and so on to be intrinsic on both sides. So I would say, yeah, let's take that risk outside and simply just say now that I think there is fertile ground in virtually all of the Caribbean for a collaboration that strengthens the hemispheric security that is targeted from here. But the way in which it is done is what is meeting some of the reaction and the grandstanding that you are referring to by some of those who are no more spoken.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to challenge you. I'll actually concur with you because I think we've argued for many, many years the U.S. needs to compete, right? And we're not going to be so subtle about saying we're talking about China here, right? China has been playing in our shared neighborhood, and because of that, we need to be able to compete. We need to show that we're interested in the region. We're willing to create and work with our partners to create the conditions that allows for foreign direct investment and that allows for digitalization efforts that are ultimately going to spur economic growth, which is going to create a more secure environment for the Caribbean. We need to compete as the United States, and I think it's not a lack of will, it's about the means by which you are competing, right? I think one point that you raised that is really important is regarding trust. Yeah. And this is something that I think, as a region, looking at both CARICOM, looking at RSS, figuring out how to work across historical rivalries, work across larger Caribbean nations versus smaller Caribbean nations, and figuring out a way and a model to be able to figure out how to grow economically as a region. Because as a business person, I would say, where do I want to invest? In a small country of X population, or do I want to invest in a region that's growing and is going to be the innovative hub for whether it's nearshoring, whether it's digitalization efforts, whether it's renewable energies, right? I want to invest regionally, but this is where I think CARICOM and the larger multilateral environment like the Organization of American States can play key roles in their ability to bring the region together and bring the sub-region of the Caribbean together to incentivize that foreign direct investment. And if what I believe is right, that the U.S. investment and U.S. support and U.S. partnership is greater, you're not going to have to compete with the Chinese because they're not going to be able to compete.
Okay, so let's look at some of the issues of security. And a recurring theme throughout this gathering has been the impact of transnational organized crime, particularly here in this hemisphere. What about for the Caribbean? What about does that rise to a level, say, top three of issues that you might have in your security agenda in Grenada?
Yeah, well, certainly. In fact, I think I can just refer to, I think it was about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, the CARICOM leaders sat in Trinidad, and they actually looked at crime, including organized crime and trafficking, especially in small arms that contribute to the crime levels in the region, as a health problem. The leaders of all the Caribbean countries were sitting there, and they were speaking of crime, organized crime, including trafficking and illicit trafficking, illicit activities as well, and the work of the cartels and so in the region as a health problem and as a social welfare problem. So yeah, it's extremely important. It's high level. Our countries depend a great deal on fishing, and part of this problem that we face and we see as narco-trafficking includes that the fisher folk of the Caribbean do not have an easy life on the open seas, even in countries' territorial waters, because of the interception with these elements and their control when they intercede with us. It means that you're talking about whole families and livelihoods that are now living under threat because they have been hijacked or persuaded by force on the open seas. I mean, a fisherman in his boat and he's fishing, and then, he's just pried upon by these people. They give him these things. He has to, and then he is now a target even when he's back ashore at home, as his family is. So it is a very important question that we should. Now, we do pay attention and should pay more attention to. Now, there's one thing that I probably should I should hasten to say. There is a misconception that the Caribbean people, including CARICOM, have not been, and leaders have not been very cooperative. And I don't think that is entirely true. The Caribbean countries, a lot of the countries have no, especially the Anglophone ones, no armies. The ones that have armies have remained integrated. That's why you found them among the SHIELD, named countries recently. But our law enforcement and our Coast Guard, marine monitoring entities have been collaborating under the regional security system and working with the Southcom's maneuvers and so on have been taking place for years. So it's not that there is not that cooperation. Right. It's not that there is not that contribution. If you put it on scale, financially it would be smaller because these are smaller economies. But in terms of cooperation, it's there. And the integration of the Southcom operations for security in the region, including the fight in narco trafficking, etc., of Caribbean law enforcement, and whether it's army, is long-standing, and I believe it is really deep. Of course, this would be not so much in the public, but I mean, I just want to very quickly say that there is that level of cooperation, and our charities are indeed participating. Yeah. Again, with the exceptions, we know where they are.
Yeah, I would say, again, I think there is that cooperation. I'm not trying to create that message or not, but it's very fickle in certain senses, right? Especially with hot button issues, right? Haiti being the perfect example, right? And how different countries are contributing in different ways. Different countries have differing opinions on how to deal with the Haiti situation. And those in closer proximity are having to, I'll give you an example. I was in Jamaica recently, and we're talking to the chief of defense. And you look at Haitian migration being their #1 security concern. Similar things in Bahamas, right? Yet you don't have what seems to be a clear and united messaging on behalf of CARICOM states as to how to get Haiti towards a more democratic state, how to combat the gangs, how to move towards integrating, although I know the historical issues associated with Dominican Republic, but integrating Dominican Republic more closely into the larger environment of dealing with the Haiti crisis. Those are the issues, those historical issues, those tenuous issues that often take the attention away or create seams of mistrust among states that ultimately hinder the potential that the Caribbean does have. Because I do believe if Caribbean nations are able to work closer together and deal with the things privately on the side and say, publicly, we need to stand united, you're going to see the Caribbean be much better off in the long run towards it. They're hard problems. Haiti is probably the hardest of all problems. But the narrative has to be a little bit different, and that's a messaging, a trust thing, and something that I think the Caribbean has not been as successful in doing.
Yeah. Again, if we stay on Haiti for a moment, again, I don't think there is any place in the Caribbean where the sentiment is not positive towards a solution in Haiti. Yeah. Of course, the resources available in the smaller countries is much less, and the gang situation CARICOM has been able to put up political presence through the Eminent Persons Group that has done quite a lot of work there. But of course, that situation is so challenging. The Eminent Persons Group could only do so much in terms of the facilitation. And CARICOM has done as much as it could do in that way. But if I can also just say that now that we have a more consensus or united approach on the international scale, all of CARICOM was there in the UN supporting, and at the UN Security Council doors, supporting the direction. But now we have that. Yeah. It means we also have a way in which we can not only fund but resource the Caribbean's continued support for Haiti. Because as you know, most Caribbean countries now have quite a heavy presence of Haitian migrated to the countries, and it's very difficult to accommodate more. So, I would just quickly say that, yeah, that's an easy ground for cooperation.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm working with the State Department as the UN Security Resolution to form the GSF was occurring. And there was I'm not going to say the state because my blood pressure is going to get really high on here, but there was a particular Caribbean nation that almost compromised a good portion of that ability to create the GSF and transition from the MSS. But you're right. You're talking about a resource-constrained environment, and countries can contribute. And this is where I think the burden sharing, as we started the conversation, President Rosenberg, really hits, because small nations, while they might not have the resources or the personnel to contribute towards national security missions like Haiti, you do have votes in these multilateral institutions, and you have pronounced voices that can kind of come out in support of regional efforts towards solving issues like Haiti.
Well, and I was curious about that, because your point earlier was there's got to be actions, and there's got to be deeds, and then later you're coming back and you're talking about narratives.
Yeah.
So in some respects, is it because, let's say, smaller states may not be able to burden share in a resource sense or in a direct policy sense, but they can burden share in a, this word is, to me, very important these days in a post-truth era, in a context of where truth isn't so important, it's the narrative that matters.
Yes.
So, I mean, not trying to say that there's a contradiction between truth and narratives, but my point is that...
Yeah, I wouldn't say truth doesn't matter. I think the truth being that speaking truth to power on public settings, using your platform that you have, matters. It's less so truth. It's maintaining the truth and saying the truth as loud as you can to say Haiti is excuse my language, a shit show. And there are things that we need to do as a community, not saying Grenada is going to do it alone, but Grenada coming out and shouting Haiti is a shit show. The international community is to come out doing it, as opposed to just being quiet in the room. I think that's important. And again, that's not a Grenada thing. Grenada's been a leader on discussing the Haiti issue, so it's not Grenada specifically.
I know, because what we're looking for in Haiti is really a solution for a return to full democracy, to proper national governance, and the proper attention to the resources that's there for the interests and the benefit of the people. And hopefully, at this iteration, it would be possible to, get the gang situation under control and allow the governance environment to improve.
So earlier in this conversation, there was mention of people, and the implication was people matter. So my question is, will the people of Grenada be better off now, given our refocusing on the region, than they were before?
Probably it's good to take a quick example here, and a very current one. I think it was yesterday, the State Department, the U.S. authorities, spoke about the establishment of a disaster response hub here in Florida. That's something concrete. That is something specific. It signals recognition of the fact that every year, at least one or two of the countries get hit by a hurricane, and economically, even socially, gets pushed back a decade or two. Infrastructure gets destroyed, and it's time to agriculture, source of food security as well as export revenue, get destroyed. Just that, we have in it an example of what meaning would be taken as positive from the words that says we are now refocusing on. That will say, I'm not only thinking about military power, I'm thinking about regional and hemispheric growth and development. I believe that is a good example for me to use to answer this question. I think if that is the approach that continues, it means that we will not just be focusing on whether a non-US vessel is going into my port. We'll be focusing on the support that is required for the upgrade of my port. It will be received. The guidance and the engineering expenses, which I cannot put for myself, which has to do with the integrity of the waterway for the deep harbor ships to really come through, and to allow that trade we're speaking about to pass through, including the trade from U.S. Entities and from nearshoring opportunities, that will be part of the narrative of the refocus. If that happens, we will not only be better off, you will see us smiling all the way, all the way to the bank.
Thank you. That was very artful. And let me give Randy Pestana the last word, please.
No, what I would say, again, I know I've been a little critical of the Caribbean in this session, and it's not intentional. It's because I believe in the potential of the region, right? The Caribbean likes to call it the zone of peace, and I agree with that. I would also say it's the zone of opportunity. I think not just for the United States, but for private sector investment, for external European powers to be able to support the Caribbean and the growth of the region. And it's one of those things that I think if we treat it delicately, we got to get the security situation under wraps, but also looking at all these other threats that are facing, the digital threats, the environmental threats. We're in Miami, the hurricane season's coming, right? All these things matter, but if we can get it right and we can develop the ability not just to absorb the capacity, but also sustain the resources and security cooperation that's going out to the region, again, I really see the Caribbean as a zone of opportunity. So I'll end with that.
Well, thank you to both of our panelists. Appreciate your approaches and your sincerity. This has been a great way to end the morning. I know we have a lunch and we'll resume shortly. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.